Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. Today I want to talk about quite a cool new feature that's been talked about in a recent Azure update for CosmosDB. So we all know if you're working with CosmosDB, tuning queries is quite challenging. Um, it's quite easy to be spending more money than you were anticipating on a CosmosDB backed application. But one of the quite cool features they've introduced is support for Query Advisor. So if we take a little bit of a look at how we can leverage that. So here's an example of where you would use this with the .NET SDK. So you can see up here, I've got my query that I'm going to run against Cosmos DB. And the key bit is when you use the SDK, you've got the query request options and this populate advice that you can now set to true. So when you execute your query, so you'll see we execute down here, and then we go and pull our results, and then here we'll get back some advice about this query, and here is an example of one of the types of advice we might get. So that's where the database engine for Cosmos DB is going to give us some guidance of how we can better tune that query. Now, let's have a think about how we might use this advice. So here's a code snippet example of a typical .NET execution against Cosmos to make a query. So what we would be doing is here we execute our query. We're then going to loop over the results. And a lot of time people will query the request charge. So that would be how many RUs you've consumed. And then you may log that somewhere. But we can actually take things a little bit further now. So if we look at a more fuller example here. So here I've got a function that's going to run my query, and I've set a threshold for what level of RUs I want this operation to be able to use. So really what I'm saying here, in this example, if I go over 100, then I want to log this, and I want to try and log the advice as well. So we've got our query. We set this query request options here to tell it to give us advice. And then we can execute the query, and then here we'd be looping over the results. Now let's note this line here where we would be getting the RUs that we've consumed, and then here we're going to capture the query advice. We then process the results, so here there's going to be a lot of code doing whatever you do with these results, and then what we can do is pop some kind of logic to say, if we broke the threshold and we've got some query advice, we can do something like log an event in App Insights, or increment a counter showing how much how many RUs we've used, or something like that. And it's really a way of getting this guidance from our running application into our logs where we can start using this. And what I'm thinking is when we're developing, the minute we start development, writing our code, we can be looking for the advice that's showing up in these logs, because it's one thing, when you use the the data explorer in Cosmos, you probably don't have much data in there. So the minute you start going to your proper dev and test environment, and you start building up the amount of data, you're going to get more visualization of how the queries are going to be formed, how much they're going to cost you. And if you can plug that guidance in, you can probably do something like a KQL query that would pull out, how many records of each type of, how many records of each type of query advice have you got? Maybe we group it by function, and we can work out where the hotspots are for being able to tune these queries. And for me, the big trade on here from this is we can then start reducing our cost if we think about the FinOps use cases. Because with Cosmos, there's lots of different knobs you can tune, but actually the key one is, do the queries that you use actually work very well or not? And hopefully this helps people when they're building a .NET app just get that bit lower level detail early in the development life cycle. Thank you for listening to today's video. I hope you have a great week.